On this episode of The Africa Whisperer.
It's not like I never heard of diamonds and gold. I've heard about diamonds and gold, especially traveling across West Africa with the war on Sierra Leone going on, but I always associated gold and diamonds with social issues.
Hey, I'm Lika Sumba, and this is our journey across Africa, navigating the intricate landscapes of business, culture, and global influence from the African perspective. Vania Leles, thank you so much for taking time out to have this conversation on the Africa Whisperer. I am, just seeing everything you've done with VANLELES, diamonds, and just your story. I'm excited to share it with everyone. I feel as though you're a visionary. You're somebody who's you're so resilient. You have the ability to redream, to reimagine things. And in doing that, you're carrying the African continent in narratives and spaces that we haven't really been in. So welcome, the creative director and the founder of VANLELES Diamonds. So lovely to have you.
Thank you so much, Lee. It's a pleasure. And I'm just so glad our paths crossed, because I think it's so important for us to be able to share our stories and share our creativity, and own our own narratives. So I think that's very, very important for me and for you too. And I listened to a few of your podcasts. By the way, congratulations. Brilliant work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So Vanya, we had actually had a pre-conversation about how it's so important to know the story behind the brand and the person behind the brand. So I want to take things way back. I think you're probably one of the first people. Yeah, you're the first person I've interviewed from Guinea-Bissau. It always is like, it's like this country that people kind of know about, don't really know about. I think you've got like 2.13 million people. That's tiny. That's like, a part of Lagos, not even.
I know. Exactly. No, it's true. Well, nice to meet you. And you consider yourself privileged, as you said.
Yeah, thank you.
Guinea-Bissau, with small country, but a land of mighty people.
Love it. I love that. I love that. So you were born in Guinea-Bissau. Talk to us a bit about your upbringing, what that experience was like, being born in Guinea-Bissau and then going to Lisbon. Just talk to us a bit about that journey and your family. What were your parents like? What are your parents like? Your siblings?
Well, I was born and raised in Guinea-Bissau. I don't have a father. My mother was a teenage mother, but a very, as I said, a mighty person, I might say. And I grew up in a very humble family, with very little resources, but and we were so happy, because it's all we known, and life was simple, easy, but very happy, right? And the difficulties, I think you only realize you're poor when you come to Europe.
Yeah, that's true. That's so true.
You realize you don't have much when you come to Europe, because I thought I had everything, and we were very self-sufficient. My grandmother was a very resourceful woman, and obviously being raised in West Africa in the 80s and 90s wasn't very easy in terms of old political instability around us, but it was not as devastating as we witness elsewhere in the world, or what was happening in East Africa with the drought. But Guinea-Bissau, although very poor, we had an abundant sea. We had fish, and we very fertile soil, so food was never a problem. And clothes was also never a problem. We might not have the best doctors, we might not have the best hospitals, but everything there was there. Is what I always said. I was raised in a humble family, but we had everything there. So, and my mother being a teenage mother, obviously we didn't have great means that I would consider, I see my children being raised with today. But so life was Nice.
Yeah, I love that because it's you said something about how you only knew, like, we only know what you don't have, like when you went to Europe, and it really just speaks to the fact that we are so, as a continent, we're so rich in resource if we measure ourselves based on what is within the continent. Obviously everything's not perfect, but all of those simplistic things, the beauty, knowing that you're eating food that's actually food, you
Yeah,
know, all of
exactly.
that. All of that, yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated with how you ended up studying in Lisbon, because a lot of people might, there's always a notion that if you're an African and you end up leaving the continent, you came from like a very powerfully political family, you were very affluent, you ran away with the country's money. Those are the things that go through people's minds. But it seems as though your mother must have sacrificed a lot for you to be able to study. So talk to us about the journey from going to Guinea-Bissau into Lisbon to study.
Well, I think that perception you just said it was very true. For instance, all the children of the political elite in Guinea-Bissau were living in Portugal, but then you have the other section that my mother has sisters living in Portugal. When she has the money, she will send me to live with my relatives, my aunts. I live with two or three aunts in Portugal, and so that's the other side. Those are not part of the elite, would send their children to study with relatives in Europe, and that was my case. My mother would, when she can, she would send me to live with my with her elder sisters that was living in
Nice.
Portugal, and then when she cannot afford it, and because everything, my aunts were not also very wealthy,
Well,
and I would go back to Bissau. But every holidays, I would spend Easter holidays or summer holidays or Christmas holidays. I would go back to Bissau. It was like
yeah.
I didn't go to like elsewhere in the world. We would go back to Bissau. We would go to Dakar. We would go to Gambia. We'd go to Cabo Verde. That was our beach holidays.
Wow.
We
Wow.
holidayed uh, on the continent, in the continent. So that was, and for me, that was like great because I wanted to go back to the heat and the beach and the fish. I hated
Yeah.
chicken. In Europe, you eat chicken all the time. No, I wanted to eat my fish.
Yeah. So you mentioned about how you traveled to all these different countries. How many African countries did you go to and travel around? Because Cape
Well,
Verde, I mean, you're saying all
yeah,
this, yeah.
we've been to Dakar. We've been to Dakar anytime. Senegal, Cap Skirring, the coast, Gambia. We we've been to. I've been to Ghana as a child, Angola, Cape Verde, we've been to Saint Tome also. So we travel around the continent. We've been to Mauritania, I think, and then
Nice.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So we tend, I tend, we definitely Guinea-Conakry because my mother has husband later on was from Guinea-Conakry. Would go a lot to Guinea-Conakry and Mali, Bamako, and so yeah. So it was my hood, West Africa.
Yeah,
It
well,
was
yeah.
my world.
And yeah, and it must be such a source of inspiration for you going to all these different countries around West Africa, many that people don't tend to travel to a lot, even
Yeah,
as Africans.
I,
So yeah.
no, for me, today is what I said, what inspire my creations, what inspire my storytelling, my narrative, my creativity is my memories growing up in Bissau and traveling across the continent, well, across the continent, across West Africa, around
Yeah.
West Africa. We didn't go east or southeast much, but just like on the coast of West Africa, we did travel quite a bit. So that was, you know, what fuels my inspiration. I remember like seeing the desert for the first time in Mauritania and Mali. That's why I love the desert so much. All my
Yeah.
collections are like the Nile was inspired by the desert. We had a Sahara collection was inspired by the desert. Blazing Trails were inspired by the desert. So
I
a
love
lot of
that.
it is inspired by my memories growing up and traveling,
Yeah.
like, in Africa with my family. Yeah. So, because my mother husband after
Yeah.
was an ambassador to Guinea-Conakry in Bissau.
Okay.
in
I like that.
Guinea-Bissau. So that's why we travel quite a bit in West
Yeah.
Africa. Yeah.
It really sounds like you had such a rich upbringing. I wish, like, yeah, if we could go back in time, I would want to be able to jump into your suitcase and be like, "Take me with you." I want to experience this and see the beauty of the continent. So Vanya, let's get into just your career and like how you got into what you're doing, right? So before you got into creating VANLELES diamonds, you were actually a model. How
Yes.
did that whole process work? I mean, it's no surprise. Like looking at you, I'm just like, oh my gosh. So how did that
Your
happen?
words.
And what was your experience like as a model? Would you say you're one of those people who had a good experience, or was it just kind of like, okay, it's paying the bills, I'll kind of get away with it?
Well, I think although my world was very rich world, very informative because I'm from Guinea-Bissau and we travel across the West Africa, and my world was very informative, right? It wasn't just my narrative from Bissau and Lisbon. It was also like Senegal, Gambia, Guinea-Conakry, Mali, all these
Mm,
places we've been. But I think when I went to do the high school, the last few years of high school in Lisbon, I was you start getting interested, intrigued into visiting other countries, right? In Europe, America was a far-fetched dream, but like going to Paris, London, and all these places I didn't know. So,
mm,
and I finished high school. I started university, and then I was scouted as a model. I didn't do it much in Portugal. It was just like a means to help pay the bills. I was studying and working. And then when I moved to London, that was when I got scouted again. I was
mhm.
scouted again. It was funny. When I wanted to go to London, my agent in Portugal, was like, oh my God, Vanya, forget it. You cannot be a model in London. I was like, okay,
You're like,
yeah, sure. And
well,
that's why I never let anyone tell you put a
mm,
limit on even. And she
mm,
was putting a limit on my physical abilities. And I am a stunning person.
yeah,
Not
definitely,
being
definitely.
like arrogant
No, no,
about
yeah.
it, just not to know who you are and what you're capable of,
Mm,
and don't let someone. And she literally, oh, when you're being a model. If I had taken that so personally, I would never try to be a model when I moved to
mm,
London, right? And I initially just moved to London because I didn't speak a word of English and I wanted to learn the language. I said, I'm
mm,
going to go to London for a year or so, see what's going to happen. Anyway, so in London, I was scouted as a model. I didn't even started trying. I was already scouted as a model. I said,
that's
Kaching. I remember her name.
you're like,
Or like
you call her.
Virginia. No, no, I remember her name. I was like, Kaching. Anyway, become a model was great. For me, it was a means to travel the world, live a glamorous life. And that I was the glamorous life perceived in the West, right?
Mm,
Because I think, and then no more countries and cultures. I wanted to travel, and modeling gave me that
mm,
opportunity to do that because we were cast. We were doing jobs in. I was cast to go to Miami and everything. And my booker once told me, Vanya, why don't you try to go to New York? Because in America, you have more opportunities to do the modeling job. I think a woman like you would be good for. In London, they were just casting me with Afro, funky, exotic,
yeah,
whatever. It was just like, and also at the time, the mentality was like there's only one model, one black model per season
yeah,
or per town. And I wasn't that skinny. I wasn't. You already had like a Naomi Campbell who was dominated, who was a supermodel, right? And then you have the
mm,
like Bede from Egypt, Ethiopia. I think we were coming. She started modeling at the same time, also as I was trying to enter the scene. So, but she was already far advanced.
mm,
So there were not room for another black models.
mm,
So I said, you know what? I'm going to use this for my benefit and just travel and enjoy. And then when I moved to New York, this is where, I had a conversation with my booker agent. I was like, what are the chances? And he said, like, Vania, the chances for you becoming a top model is not. It's not going to happen. You're going to continue to work well at the level you are at, but not much. I was like, thank you so much for being very honest. This is exactly what I needed to start looking for something else to do in my life. And that was giving me an alert to start searching, what can I do. I knew I didn't want to go back to social worker, and I knew I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to have like a boring job. I needed, you know, I think once you become a model, you have the bug for the
Something,
luxury world, for something
yes,
exciting, for something more
yeah.
vibrant. And I will always going to be grateful to modeling, because modeling led me to travel. Modeling led me to the world of fine jewelry, you know.
Yeah.
And that to say, and then I just quit. I was thinking how to do next and how just to quit. I wasn't very happy being a model. It was too much. I'm a very healthy person. I never smoke. I never drunk. I never touch any kind of substances. So, and that world was like very, and I also started modeling late in my life, right? I wasn't 12 or 14 years old. I was already a fully grown
Yeah.
woman with great
Yeah.
value set of what life should be and what you should do as a woman and should
And
not.
knowing who you are, and you knew who you were, so people couldn't shift you around.
No,
Yeah.
couldn't shift me around, couldn't pursue me,
Mm.
I would have had fun in my own way. I remember people saying, how can you have so much fun? You don't even drink. I said, well, exactly. I'm having so much fun because I don't drink, because if
Yeah.
anyway. So, and I remember one job I did, and which was a photo shoot with amazing fine jewelry, coming from a humble family. I've never seen so much sparkling diamonds and jewelry like that. I knew like small, tiny gold jewelry, but that's not anything I would
Wasn't
possibly.
the same.
Yes. And I remember just being fascinated looking at the table. Oh my God, this is so beautiful. This is amazing. And this guy was like, look at me. He was like, how come you're so surprised? Probably all of these diamonds and gemstones came from your home continent. And I was like, whoa. And, it's not like I never heard of diamonds and gold. I've heard about diamonds and gold,
Yeah.
especially traveling across West Africa with the war on Sierra Leone going on. But I always associated gold and diamonds with social issues. Never with
Of
amount of
course, because of the
wealth,
conflict.
never with
Yes,
amount
yes.
of wealth. When I say wealth, it generates, it's not wealth in money, being rich and having possessions. The amount of wealth it generates in wealth, in skills, in employment, in generational wealth, generational skills, generational. You see a city like Antwerp. Pretty much every single person is employed in the diamond industry, and yet Belgium doesn't produce an ounce of diamonds. You see all these amazing cities, you know, developing and that using the diamonds that come from Africa, and then you don't see the same kind of impact on the continent, So growing up in the 80s and 90s in West Africa, I was like, I associated gold and diamonds with the social issues, but this is what is being transformed outside the continent, and we didn't even know that. I had
Yeah.
no clue.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
that really sparkled as a curiosity in me, and a bug that I'm very persistent. If I put my head to something, I follow through, and I really
Yeah.
work hard to. And I start researching, to see all these brands, all these diamond companies, all these jewelry company. I'm sure they are going to have some reference to where these diamonds come from, these stones come from. This was 2003, 2004, right? And in New York, I was like, oh, this brand exists for 160 years. This brand exists for almost 200 years. This brand exists for 140 years or 100 years. I'm sure they're going to mention where the diamonds come from, or I will see someone who look like me in those brands, in those companies.
Nothing.
Zero, nada. Not even them acknowledging
That it came from Africa. Nothing.
the countries,
Yeah.
in Africa, where the diamond's coming from, no one was
Mm.
mentioning it. I was like, how
Mm.
can this be possible? How can this? And then you think this is the reason why when I was growing up, I was only associating them with this because this is what, you
Mm.
know, the powers who dominate this industry want us to keep thinking, right? To keep believing and
Yeah.
to keep knowing. And then I then said, I'm going to go to the diamond district. I will meet a dealer or or someone who looked like me who could possibly advise me how to. That was the biggest shock. I got to the diamond district. You see generations of people working together, but there's no Africans or someone who
Mm.
look like me in that
Mm.
district. Literally none. And you see third generation, fourth generation, families working together, community neighbors working together, and then but everybody's sourcing in Africa. Everybody's buying stones in Africa.
But there's no African, like, there's no African generation. There's no African, like, you don't even see it. There's not even an African family who has a stake in the game. That's, yeah, yeah.
Zero.
Mm.
I was so shocked. I remember going back home and telling my mother that evening. I was like, you know what? I want to have I want to become a diamantier. I want to have a diamond brand, and I want to have a high jewelry brand where I honor the
Mm.
countries where the gemstones come from, and be
Mm.
owned by an African, have an African heritage and authenticity to it. My mother was
And
like,
what did your mother react like? Yeah. I mean, she must have been like, okay, so you were modeling and now you want to do this.
yeah.
How does that conversation happen? Yeah.
My mother was like, well, first of all, you know, she didn't want to dishearten me. She said, like, how would you possibly enter that industry, and
Mm.
how would you possibly have anything within that industry? And she was like, okay, why don't you try to get a foot in the door and then work in industry? If you get lucky, someone opening the door for you because it's so generational, and then you can work in industry for about 10 years before you start dreaming of anything remotely of what you're telling me
Mm.
now. So for her and for me, it was so far-fetched, but in my head, it wasn't impossible. But this is
Mm.
me being naive and innocent. Being naive sometimes is such a blessing, because what
Yes.
I know today, if I knew back then, I wouldn't have done it
Yeah.
because it's
If you
so
knew the
hard.
journey, you wouldn't have gotten into the car, right? You would have just
Well,
said, I'll
I
stay
knew
here.
the journey will be long. I didn't know it was going to be this hard. I didn't know
Uh,
people were trying to stop me or
mm.
sabotage me or
Mm.
break what I was trying to build. And
Mm.
I'm saying that the giants who play in this industry, to our very own people,
Mm.
to people who look
Yeah.
like me, I was like, why are
Yeah.
you doing this?
Why you? Yeah.
Why are you
Yeah.
here? Why are you doing, to the
Mm.
point that having clients tell me to my face, a wealthy African person look at me, no, I'd rather buy Cartier or I'd rather buy this and this brand. I was like,
Mm.
because rather than buy from me, going back at that point, I was like, where can I start? I start researching. Long story short, I started researching, and I went and I said, okay, I want to go back to study again. And at that point, I saved enough money, and I went to do GIA. I enrolled myself at Gemological Institute of America, and
Mm.
then I studied there. I did gemology course, the pearl course, the design course, the hand design course, the business
Mm.
course, and then I was armed. But at that point, I moved back to London because it was easier to study in London than study in New York. And because of health insurance and technicalities, it was also easier just to live in Europe. I'm closer home. And anyway, so I came back to London. I continue at the GIA campus in London. And then by the time we were graduating, I only wanted to work for Graf Diamonds, because Graf Diamonds
Yes.
at the time was still a family owned business. They were smaller. So 2005, I just, we graduated, and I just started sending my CV to Graph. I sent them like 15 times my CV, and then I had no answer. I literally stalked them. I went to the store until one day I saw Mr. Graf coming, and I went to him. Mind you, I wasn't speaking as good English I'm speaking today. My English was very broken. I said, like, Mr. Graf, my name is Vania. This is my CV. I would love to work for a family, for your company. I don't have experience, but I work very hard. I learn very fast, and I'm very, very smart. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of
Wow.
varies. I said, yes, I can prove to you.
Yeah.
So he took the envelope off my hand. He went inside. A few days later, I got a phone call, and I went for an interview. And then at the end of the interview, he was like, "You know why I called you? When I enter my building, the security team called me and asked me if I knew who you were." I said, "No, I don't know." So, well, she's been walking around the building for the last month, but we didn't know who she was. She didn't look threatening, and then today we saw her speaking to you, so this is why. And you he was like, "You've been around?" I was like, "Yes, I sent my CV 15 times through the post. I had no answer, so I thought I would come to your doorstep and then give you my CV in hand." And I got a job.
Vanya, this is so powerful because I feel even with the way that things are now, everybody assumes that it's always quick. If you get a rejection, you're kind of like, move on, like you're being redirected. And sometimes it's the case, but I just love this level of your conviction and your resilience to be like, I want to work with the Graf family. This is who I want to work with. I'm sending a CV 15 times. If not, I'm going to walk around the building. Is there something in your childhood or something that you maybe learned from your mom that maybe it has instilled that kind of resilience and persistence and determination to be able to achieve what it is that you wanted to achieve?
I defied so many odds, and looking at my mother, being a teenage mother, abandoned by the person who was supposed to be my father, and building a life, surviving, making sure I also survived. And then we had, she had lost everything like three times in her life. The last time in 98 with the civil war, she left the country with the clothes on her body and never came back. She went back after a few years, 10 years, but after the war, but she built, her life from zero three times, and the last time I was like, with the war, I was already an adult. I was like, "Mom, don't you think you need to see a therapist, wherever?" I said, "No, Vani, what I need is a house and a job. I don't need to see a therapist.
Yeah.
I might do at
Yeah.
some point, but right now, this is what I need. These are my immediate needs." So giving up is never an option. And if you come from a humble family, you have to fight for everything you have,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So
mm,
then if you do, and she's already said, "You healthy, you pretty, you are already winning in life," right? Anything else, you have to work hard. It's a bonus. So what do I have to lose if I wanted to work for this family? What I had to do, I will do it in the most
mm,
honorable, hardworking manner, right? And I wanted to
mm,
work for him. You didn't answer my CV the 15 times I sent. I'm gonna walk around your building until I
I
see
love
you
that.
in person, and it worked. It could have not worked, right? And it worked, and I went and I worked very hard, and I was very, I was the first one to arrive, the last one to leave my job. It was a dream job. Fast forward, I got headhunted to go and work for the BS Diamond Jewelers. At that point, I already wanted to work for a corporation. My aim goal was always to create my own brand, my own African heritage, own, you know, female brand, But as the more I work in industry, the more I learn, the more I know is virtually impossible for me to have the brand I have today. But I didn't give up also, because I said, you know what, let me just put my head down, work hard, build my reputation, build my name, people to get to know me. I would go to every fairs, and for me at the time, traveling to all the fairs, you would go and see all these beautiful. You'd go to an exhibition where you have 3,000 exhibitors, everybody selling gemstones and diamonds, but no one was mentioning. I remember seeing Colombian emeralds, and you see Burma rubies, but no one was mentioning Zambian emeralds. And Zambian emeralds exist for 100 million years. Ruby has been here for 400 million years, but no one's rubies from Mozambique, but no one was mentioning these gemstones, but yet they were in the market. They've been mined, they've been traded, they've been polished, they've been put in beautiful, magnificent jewelry, but no one was talking about these countries where the gemstones were coming from.
It's almost like, historically, the world always wants to strip the African story from Africa being, the place where a lot of things are coming from. So I just find it so fascinating that you having direct experience with that. But you were saying about the diamonds as well.
At the time, no one was interested in mentioning where the diamonds was coming from. If there was, it was not as loud as it is today. Today, every brand is very loud about it, but those are the same brands who's been existing for 100 years, and decades and decades. It's just like, it's almost like, it's better late than never. So I'm glad they're putting a spotlight on those communities. So, and let's put a spotlight on mining companies, on conditions, on countries to make it better and right and equitable for the communities where they're mining. It's still not equitable. It's still a long way to go, but at least it's better than it was 100 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 20 years ago. Because of the spotlight needed to be put on those communities and people operating on those communities. So I think we came a long way. And I can proudly say I had my little noise to the bigger to this platform to highlight the countries where the gemstones come from, especially with the Zambian and Mozambican. I cannot change how they operate, how the countries operate, and the political systems or the mining company deals. My job is to say, in Mozambique there are rubies. In Mozambique there are gemstones being used in the market, to highlight what exists there. My purpose is, in Zambia, Zambian emeralds are as beautiful as Colombian emeralds, and they have been in the market for decades and decades and decades. So this is my job. This is my job. This is my purpose. A lot of people say, oh, but Africa has so many other problems. I said, it does, but it also have these,
Yes, we have to be able to tell a balanced story about Africa. Yeah, it has to say everything.
Yes, concurrently. I said, Colombia also have other major problems, but you're still advertising Colombian emeralds. Burma have other major problems, but you still advertise Burma rubies. So don't give me that speech. But so my purpose is that. Your purpose is highlight everybody else's stories. The other Noelle, a friend of mine, her purpose is to highlight education and water wells. So we all have a purpose, and this is my purpose. Don't tell me my purpose is less important because it's luxury. Well, luxury create employment. Diamond create employment. Look at generations of people, or diamanteers, of family diamanteers who build their family generations and family wealth out of African diamonds. So don't tell me it doesn't have a purpose, because it does. He might not be water doctor or teacher, but he has other purpose, that collectively we can build a narrative that we own.
So even with everything that you're saying and the access you had, you worked with Sotheby's, you worked with De Beers, you had obviously started out your career with Graf and all of that, starting your own fine jewelry line. That, to me, that seems, you see, this is the part that I'm just like, in my mind, like if I were to start, I'm like, okay, I can see like studying like perhaps and everything, but to actually start it must be so capital intensive. It must be so difficult to break through and to get people to want to buy, and to be able to want to be your customers. And even with that, you've been able to get Queen Rania has been one of your customers. You have Rihanna who's worn your stuff. You have the Princess of Wales, Catherine, who's worn your stuff, which is incredible. But it's easy to look at that, but I'm so fascinated with how you actually got the money to get this thing started, because I heard that you convinced people to borrow you diamonds to the value of £1 million in order to be able to start your range. Vanya, I need to understand those skills so I can try it in other things. I'll tell somebody, give me your diamonds worth £1 million and I'll make something of it. That's incredible. So talk to us about just that journey. I think there's so many nuggets in there.
Yes. So at that point when I was ready, I already worked 10 years. I've been 10 years in the industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I after the years, I went to work for Sotheby's as a jewelry client manager for the jewelry department. And I was able to build an extensive client list because my job was just entertaining clients also, as well as valuing the jewelry states. So when I left Sotheby's, I decided to create my own brand. This is like 11 years passed. I remember going back to conversation I had with my mom. You asked for 10 years, I gave you 11. 1 year is
here I am.
But, working for these companies, you don't make money. And at the time I was engaged with my husband now. And I remember I never said this before, but I had £5,000
Wow.
in my saving I could do something with. £5,000 in jewelry. Today, I look what I spent to make one piece. £5,000 is nothing, but I had £5,000. I decided to hire an agency to build my website. I designed my own logo, and the agency just fixed the logo a bit. We built a website. I bought very nice stationery, like beautiful. Everything was done to a taste, with a taste and elegance. And then I rented a service office in Belgravia. So that 5,000 gone because I had to give the rent deposit, build the stationery, create a website. And then I went to one of the diamond suppliers we used to work with when I was working for the brands. I was like, Yoshi, this is my plan. I'm creating my own brand. I already have the brand. I have the office. I just don't have something to sell.
You're like, everything is there minus the product. So do you see
minus the product? And I cannot sell jewelry without the product. And I would need you to have diamonds and memo. But because it's what I always say, your reputation is the most, and integrity is the most important thing you have in the industry. Remember, I didn't start with connections. I didn't start with the family linked. I didn't start with money. I started with zero.
You're not an African princess there's nothing like that. You're just
no. Yeah, zero. And then I will get to that point in a little bit. And Yoshi was like, well, but yes, we know you, Miss Vania, but just lend you diamonds. And I remember his wife, the very Jewish Orthodox, his wife was like, Yoshi, give the girl some diamonds. She will come. She will pay you. So his wife nudged him, was like, are you sure? I was like, give her the diamonds. Otherwise, how she's going to start? How she's going to have a business? Yeah. So... Wow. That was great. I was like, thank you. He's like, Vanya, bring me the money or my diamonds back. I said, yes. Now I need you to agree on terms. I need 12 months to give you, because anyway, gave me very good terms. And then we signed a piece of paper. It gave me about 12, 13 diamonds. The total value was just over $1 million. And then I went to the workshop I used to work with. And the workshop, I told them, I knew them. I was like, I would like to make these designs. I made some sketches. I made some designs. I would like to make these pieces of jewelry, but I don't have money to pay you for the gold, the micro pavé, and the labor. Can you give me good terms? Again, I'm always forever grateful to my workshop in Italy. I still work with them. They made all my jewelry, the engagement rings, the classic. I started with the classic
I love
eternity
that.
rings and everything they made. And then I contacted my first clients. And then my ex-colleague at De Beers introduced me to a few of her friends who were getting engaged, and I sold them my first engagement ring. But as soon as I sell something, I go straight and I pay Yoshi, and I pay my diamond supplier, Yoshi's name. Now everybody knows his name. And then I go
Yeah.
and I pay my workshop, because your reputation is all you have. In some of the sales, I made very little money, but I had no profit for me. I don't pay me until I pay them first, period. And then a little by little, I sold all the pieces. I made some profit. I reinvest in the business. Then I can go and buy some diamonds. I buy some, and it give me 50% of memo. I buy 50%. The workshop makes me some pieces. They make 50%. I pay 50%. So this is how I was able to build the first 3 years of my business. And then in 2015, one of my clients was like, Vania, what do you need to start your business? Because he knew I wasn't this, although I have a fancy website, I have this fancy stationery. He knew
But
that,
he knew the truth, what was happening behind the scenes.
well, he's a businessman, right? And he was buying
Yeah.
jewelry for his partners.
Yeah.
And then I was like, capital. This business is capital intense. I don't have it. And then I forgot. And then my husband now at the time wanted to propose, and he said, Vani, I can give you an amazing engagement ring, or I can give you the money to I was like, no, forget the engagement ring, give me the money.
You're like, I'll put it to good use. Oh, I love
Give me
that.
the money. I
I love
invest
it.
the money into the business, and he gave me this beautiful ring that I wear every day.
Oh,
And this was my
oh,
engagement ring. So simple, nice. This and my business are like my engagement rings, right? So
yeah.
but that's he ended up saying that's the best investment he ever made, because he doesn't ever have to buy jewelry again in his life.
Exactly.
So
Oh,
yeah, so then and then this investor came in. He invested, he owned a piece of the company. We actually just bought him out. I own the business 100% as of last week.
oh,
So yeah,
congratulations. Yeah.
so we've been able to buy him out, and he, he invested with that money. We were able to create the brand we have today. We created our
Yes.
first collection using Zambian emeralds. I call it Legends of Africa, honoring the beauty of Zambian emeralds. And then our second collection was out of Africa, honoring only rubies from Mozambique and rubelites, honoring the beauty of Mozambican rubies and gemstones. Because that was and I remember when we had this fancy showroom on Bond Street, opposite Graph, it's almost like full circle has gone by, between Cartier and Chanel. Prime location. I wanted that. This is an African brand sitting alongside all these brands who's
I
been mining
like
in
this.
Africa
Yeah.
for decades, if not centuries, right? Because of Tiffany's 160 years old now. So, and then I wanted that, and everything was done to perfection. The taste and elegance and qualities there. The same hands that make all these big brands jewelry are the same hands that make my jewelry. So,
Yeah.
and the same, so where they buy their diamonds, that's where I buy my diamonds. This is just, and so that's how. And at the time, I remember like hiring PR agencies. The first PR agency was like, well, Vanny, I would tone down an African tone a bit, because journalists won't care, consumers won't care. I was like, the sole purpose that I wanted to enter this industry is to create this representation, this gap that is lacking. Are you telling me to tone it down? I think I need a different PR agency. So I went to second PR agency, and then I went to third PR, and then the fourth PR agency finally work on my terms, push the narrative, the authentic and genuine and beautiful narrative that it is VANLELES, right? There's no other brand like me. There's no other
No
jewelry
other.
owner like high jewelry owner of a brand like mine or like me. And my story is one of resilience. But when I started the stereotype, I remember like having some journalist editor, oh, so who's your family? There we go
Are you
again.
joking? Yeah,
But
yeah.
because
That's
she's in diamond industry. She's a daughter of a rich, corrupt politician. That's
yeah.
all
She's
they.
like an African princess somewhere.
Yeah.
She's
Oh,
somehow connected. She's ran
and
away
I
with the country's
speak.
money.
Yeah, and I speak Portuguese. Oh, you're from Angola. Is your father the president? I said,
Yeah.
no, my
Oh,
father. I'm not
yeah.
from Angola,
Wow.
and I don't have a
Yeah.
father. And you
Yeah.
almost like trying to break down every single stereotype they expect you to be. And then, oh, your jewelry. He was like, oh, I was expecting ethnic jewelry like bead and brass and whatever. No,
Mm.
it's fine. High
Mm.
jewelry.
Mm. I mean,
So
all of these questions that they were asking you, it's almost as though people are saying, "Why are you here? Why are you in our space? Why do you have a seat at the table?" And it was almost like people. I can imagine for you, it just sounds as though they were trying to justify or trying to get you to explain your position. Why are
yeah,
you here? This is
my
our world.
presence, my
Your
presence.
presence.
Why?
Yeah.
You know, expecting to, oh, who's your investor? That was like,
Mm.
when I explained them everything, even telling them my story, I was like, oh, who's
Mm.
your investor? I was like, my investor is a British hedge fund guy. Couldn't be a squeaky
Yeah.
clean. And by the
Yeah.
way, all this is in a company house,
Mm.
is a public information. They can see
Mm.
because in the UK, if a registered business, every
You have to.
investor partner is
Mm.
registered. It's public
Mm.
information.
Yeah.
So it's almost like just kind of to justify, you know. And I'm like, no, I work very hard. I did my studies. I'm not like a daughter of
Mm.
someone or a wife of someone rich and
Someone.
with
You
money.
are
I
Vanya.
I am
Yes.
Vanya. I
Yes.
built this. I'm standing here strong and proud and capable, showing you
Mm.
what I have curated through sweat and tears. Nothing
Mm.
else.
And Vanya, also, I'm kind of interested because there was a point when you said about and we actually had this conversation, about how as Africans, outside of a lot of the gemstones coming from Africa and being sourced from Africa, originally, along with other parts of the world, there's also the fact that Africans, we were the first to kind of adorn and to wear gold. It was who we were as a people. I mean, even being in Ghana, when you go to the Ashanti family, it's like, in the traditional days, I'm just like, it's not like small gold, it's like boom,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
people,
Yeah.
it's part of the attire. But just talk to us, where do you think that we lost the mark when we had all of the skills in Africa, we were able to do it, and then now we're not even really manufacturing on the continent. So what are your thoughts around that?
You know, African civilizations were one of the first civilizations where using precious metal, gold, and precious gemstones to adorn our bodies. You know,
Mm.
we have the story of Mansa Musa, you have the story Queen Makeda, and you have the story of Cleopatra, carving emeralds, adorning a body. Mansa Musa, his cloth was gold, however heavy
Yes.
that was, and were made of gold. So, and unfortunately, we had those four to 400 to 500 years, if I want to be politically correct, gap in our history where we had slavery, colonization, that
Mm.
dismantling the kingdoms of East Central Africa, from Ashanti, all
Mm.
these kingdoms that we were manufacturing jewelry and producing not only jewelry with the gold, but cloths and
Mm.
weaving gold into cloths, right? So I think with that centuries of the industry being disrupted and kingdoms and families and empires being dismantled through slave
Mm.
trade and all, we lost, and that skills got transferred elsewhere and it got
Mm.
better and industrialized elsewhere like India, China, and Europe.
Mm.
Like you have cities in Valencia that every single family is a jeweler maker. You have Ida Uberstein in Germany. Every single family is a stone cutter, stone polisher. Germany needs the stones that come from outside Germany to be able to polish, but the entire city is
Wow.
just polishers and cutters. The skills are there. So African lost that skills, lost that trade, lost that, this is why voices like mine and companies like mine are so important, because
Mm,
almost like it might not going to happen in my lifetime, but definitely my children's lifetime, we
mm,
ought to be able to see these skills being reestablished in on a continent.
yes.
But
Yes.
our politicians, our leaders needs to be willing to
Mm,
to be able to reinforce that, to create that, encourage that, because I cannot buy Ghanaian gold in Ghana, but I can buy
mm,
Ghanaian gold in Dubai,
mm.
in Denmark, or in
Yeah.
Birmingham. When
Yeah, that's crazy.
with,
Mm.
if I want to buy Angolan diamonds, I was literally told I can buy Angolan diamonds. Oh, but not in Luanda. You have to buy it in Dubai.
The thing is, like, you said this at the beginning of the conversation, but people look at what you do with VANLELES diamonds, and they kind of are like, well, this is not a serious issue in Africa. People, like in certain parts, people maybe don't have food. There's all of these other issues. Luxury is a whole other, it's not really a necessity. But when you consider the fact that pre colonization and all of the challenges that the continent went through, this was what was feeding and sufficing a lot of people. And when you consider the fact that a whole cities in Europe, like you've articulated, are built off this diamond industry, the gemstone industry, and they don't even have a single mine. It's really clear that our leaders have to be in a position where it's like, as we're rebuilding and retelling the story of Africa and taking ownership, like what you're doing with VANLELES, there has to be a place where there is a level of like investment, even as us as Africans. I feel like we should be like, if I want to buy diamonds, I should be looking at VANLELES. If I want to, I should be going to you first,
Yeah.
in order to be able to create jobs, because we need multiple jobs and multiple opportunities.
Absolutely, Lee.
Yeah.
I think we need industrialization, and
Mm,
I spoke at a conference a few years ago, just before COVID. Okay, everybody says it's so difficult, it's impossible. Dubai did it. Now Dubai has the
mm,
biggest diamond center in the world, one of, right? And it did it in
mm,
20 years. 20 years ago, Dubai was plain desert. Concurrently, they build, you know, all the diamond conferences are held in Dubai. Let's hold diamond
mm,
conferences in an African producing diamond country, right? Why do we have to
exactly.
fly, use the airways, use the hotel, the taxis, the restaurants, the shopping, and go to a conference of diamonds when Dubai doesn't mind an ounce of diamonds? It's not like,
Wow.
I said, like, it has been done. Hong Kong, the jewelry hub and the diamond bourse. Africa doesn't have one functioning diamond bourse. One.
Hmm.
It baffles
Yeah.
me. And it was like,
Mm,
and we have the product. It's almost like divide and conquer. They can have the product, they cannot have the skills. They cannot industrialize the industry. Otherwise,
mm,
we will have generational Africans,
mm,
diamanteers, or jewelers, because
mm,
it is creating wealth and employment and skills and
mm,
knowledge.
mm.
You know, because what they tell you is not important, is not
Yeah.
necessary, but it's creating wealth, skills,
For other
knowledge,
people.
employment elsewhere. Why not here? Why not on the
Yeah. Yeah.
continent, right? My dream
Mm,
is to produce jewelry on the continent. But for me to
mm,
have this strong narrative, the strong product, the quality that is rivaling other brands, for even our Africans to buy my product, I have to produce it, elsewhere.
mm,
I have to
mm,
produce it in Italy. But, we have to encourage this. Okay, this African person can do it without
mm,
resources, connection, and any help from outside world. Yes, I
mm,
had help. I had like my Mr. Graphic giving me my first job. Yoshi and his wife.
After you applied 15 times.
Yes,
So it was help after you really pushed yourself.
I pushed
Yes.
myself and stoked him. And then Yoshi and his wife lending me the diamonds at the workshop in
Mm,
Italy to make my jewelry, right? I had help,
mm,
but I have to put myself in a position to be given the help, to be
mhm,
given the hand. And I built my
mhm,
company and I was selling to this client of mine for him to be able to invest in my company because I have built something through
mm,
nothing. You know, I
mm,
moved to London. I didn't even speak a word of English, you know. Yes, I
mm,
knew, hello, what's your name? How are you? How old are you? Is what I always say, you know, and it has to our African counterpart, it has been done already
mm,
elsewhere. Let's just copy. The wheel has
mm,
been done. Let's just r- replicate it in
mm,
countries like Namibia, like Rwanda, who has
mm,
infrastructure, like Cape Verde,
mm,
who has infrastructure, who has a security. Yes, we can always implement more securities. We have to have the willingness to
mm,
do so. And I still feel like most people don't have the willingness. You know, this is why I
mm,
admire sometimes countries like the Middle East. They don't think about 10 years. They don't think
mm.
about my generation. They think about in 100 years, the
Yes, it
generations to
has to be
come.
generational. Yeah,
We cannot
yeah.
make policy decisions just for the next 10 years. We have to make
Mm,
policy decisions to impact generations to come.
mm.
This is what I think is lack when we look at our natural resources.
It's fantastic, but it's only 10 years. Yeah.
Well, you have to think what value is gonna bring to the company, to the country, for your people, not for the next, not for one generation, but
Mm,
for two, three generations ahead. And
mm,
then see like what impact we want to have on a continent.
mm,
Sometimes I see all these companies where, oh, we're building a road, we're building a school, we're building a crash, we're building a clinic, and they call it impact. In my opinion, those things could have been impactful 100 years ago.
mm,
Today, I don't call it an impact. It's just like
mm,
breadcrumbs sprinkled al- al- along the road. A real impact is when an African diamond producing country become the next Antwerp, employing
mm,
250,000 people. Generational families are benefiting for this industry, are becoming skills, master, and skillful and knowledgeable.
mm,
Impact means having a diamond bourse on an African producing country that will generate the amount of sales and movement the diamond bourse in Dubai, who has been there for less than 20 years, will generate. That's a real impact on an
yeah.
African producing diamond country.
Mm.
Anything else is for their own marketing and PR benefit.
What you said about really thinking generationally, it's something that unfortunately we don't think of much, as African people, and hopefully this starts to change. Vanya, one of the things I really love about Van Leles Diamonds is the fact that and you had alluded to this, you really put Africa at the front and center. And I know that, I want to go into the range a bit. I know that, I think it was the Enchanted Garden, if I'm not mistaken, this was inspired off the batik fabrics and that you had seen and everything. And I just love the fact that all of it has like this great story. You're unashamed in saying this is based on the batik fabric. This was, you're telling all those stories. So talk to us about some of the ranges, the Nile range, the Enchanted Garden, just the inspiration behind those, and the time it takes to create them.
Well, to create, I have time because I make my own decisions. So I don't rush,
Mm,
I don't push. But for instance, the Enchanted Garden, you quite rightfully mentioned, was inspired by a piece of cloth, an African
mm,
batik, a print. We wanted to
mm.
do an earring shape. We found this cloth that was so beautiful. I think you have it on our website. It's almost like,
Yes.
a flower cuff. That was where the Enchanted Garden was born from,
Mm,
and that lend itself to this beautiful piece of jewelry that we actually became our best known collections. And then our Blazing Trail collections were based on like the desert, as I was saying earlier, the desert really inspires me, moves me, because I just love the magnificent sight we saw in Mali and Mauritania as a child. I just love that, and to know that and at the time I thought that was endless world, and Europe was on the other side of it. And so then the Nile was just like inspired by this geographic geometric shapes, and we found in in Egypt when I traveled there, and then we try to tell the storytelling behind each piece of our jewelry, the collection, and the shape that lend themselves, found in a tile, in a pyramid in Egypt, that then lend itself for us to create that shape and mimic that shape into fine jewelry.
I love that. And the jewelry really is beautiful. It stands out. I don't know if there's another jewelry range that when you look at it, you feel like you step into that world. It's, I
Yeah.
don't know how to explain it. It's able to, it's almost like, I know most jewelry is art and jewelry is art, but it really feels like all of these paintings, but in the form of jewelry, telling like different stories about Africa. So it's just, the range is incredible.
You
I'm
will
also
love
really
our
fascinated.
upcoming. Sorry, you will love our
Pardon?
upcoming collections that really tells magnificent stories. You will love
Oh,
them.
I really like. And in terms of like, I mean, because I had mentioned before about some of the clientele that you've had from people outside of Africa. What are your hopes and aspirations in terms of having, like similar clientele in Africa? What would you say to people who are in a position to be able to buy Van Leles diamonds? What would you say to that? Like, what kind of people would you like to see wearing your range?
Nothing will give me more pride and satisfaction to see our celebrated women and men wearing Van Leles diamonds. And I said, there's an African say, the sky is big for all the birds to fly. So they can own all the other brands, but for me to have our iconic men and women, when I say our, means like African and African in the diaspora, to wear it, it would just it's an extra step of validation. Yes, having Queen Rania owning my creations. We don't lend jewelry, and all the three women own their own pieces of Van Leles they wear, and it was just like a huge, her seeing it and liking it and buying it. I was like, wow, that's a testament of my brand speaks globally to the
I think she
global.
wore the Kilimanjaro range, right?
Yeah, the
The
Kilimanjaro.
Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, the Kilimanjaro is
Yes.
one of the pieces she has, and she wore it several times already. And you know, I'm just like so proud every time she wears. Is a testament that my story, my company, what my company stands for, it's very much African, but the story of the woman behind it speaks globally, speaks to the woman sitting in Lagos, in Accra, in New York, in Atlanta, in Riyadh, and in Jordan, in Singapore. So it speaks to, it's a story of resilience. It's a story of a woman who took her creativity to the highest of heights with hard work.
When I was reading up and seeing some of the work that you've done, I love the fact that you're so passionate about philanthropy. And just from this conversation, I think people can tell, there's some people who are involved in philanthropy because it's the right thing to do. But clearly, there's something inside of you that burns so much that you're so passionate about it. So you've worked with the Malika Foundation. Also, I believe that you're one of the people who assisted the AU when it came to COVID relief and being able to send a portion of the sales sales of the Now collection to assist with that during COVID. Congratulations on that.
you.
That's beyond impact. And also you being able to, I believe it was like 100% sales of the gold and diamond range from the Now range that goes to the Malika Foundation. What is it about, COVID? Obviously, it was a global crisis. Africa was not receiving the assistance that the rest of the world was. But with the Malika Foundation, what is it about that foundation specifically? Because even when you see the pictures of you with them, you can see that there's like something that glows inside of you. What is it specifically that you feel is so important?
First of all, I think the founder of the Malika Foundation, my dear friend Noella, she's a remarkable young woman. What she has done, I wish what she's done and achieved and the impact she's able to generate. I wish most of these NGOs would be, I feel, doesn't even does a tenth of what she does or of the impact she provides to society. Well, I believe, however small you have, you can always give that a little bit to someone else who have far less than you. You know, my company is not a big company, but I always believe that you have to be generous of soul, of spirit. And I always looking for charities I could partner with. And I partnered with some in the past, but then it didn't feel right because it didn't feel right for the one reason, because I don't have much resources to donate, and I wanted to see the greatest impact in the community where that charity operates. And for me, I chose Malika not only because I met Noella, really inspired her, and then I went to the school personally, to the village, and to one charity. I want to know everything about it. I said, I'm coming. And I went, and it was the most amazing thing I did, because I know the little money I donated to Malika will go a long way, and will go directly to where it's needed, not to a big offices rent in London or the CEO biggest bonuses or salaries. Everything goes back to the community. So that's why I chose Malika. It's one only foundation because I cannot spread too much. I wish I could do more,
course, yeah.
but I don't have the resources to do more. Hopefully in the future, if I have all our people behind us supporting us, that'd be great. I could give more. Right now, I'm just focus just one to see the impact going further and further and further. So then when the Afro champion approached me at the time of COVID-19, I was like, yes, of course, I have limited resources, but let's all the sales, donations, all the sales, receipts, and we're going to donate a portion to the call. I want to be at the front center of it, and let me do what I can help. So, but that was, and I'm actually also very glad like Africa responded very well to COVID, because we're so experienced in dealing with the viral
because of
diseases.
everything, yeah,
We already
Ebola,
set up
everything
for that. Yeah. So actually we were very well equipped to deal with it immediately. But and then so this is for me choosing one small charity where I can see the lives of people that they work with are impacted almost immediately. It's very key for me to see that result.
Yeah. And Vanya, before I let you go, and just, I do want to close off the conversation about asking about the kind of legacy that you want to build, because the whole fine jewelry is generational. And I think that that's one of the themes that has come through. It's generational. It's a story of resilience. It's a story of vision. It's a story of reimagining and rebuilding. Vanya, just in closing, it's been like a fantastic conversation, you've already achieved so much. I know that you feel that you have so much further to go, but it's like, I feel as though just your presence, your story, coming from the background that you came from, I hope that it inspires people who don't come from privileged backgrounds, who also feel that, I mean, they also feel like, how am I ever going to get to the next place? Who have an idea and don't quite know how to get there, but they know that they want to get there. I really hope that they're inspired by your story, whatever sector, whatever industry, whatever their dream may be. And also, I feel as though, one of the key things that stood out was about just the fact that the industrialization of the gemstone and diamond industry in Africa can really help to propel the African continent forward. It really is something that we need to be able to look into. And as Africans, we need to, like you said, the sky is big enough for all the birds to fly, and it's okay to own jewelry from everyone. But please, also, as you're engaging with African music, as you're engaging with African culture and everything, also find out about a brand, a range like VANLELES, House of VANLELES diamonds, and include that as well, so that we're building into what it is that we're doing. But for you, your legacy, if what would you want your ultimate legacy to be? How do you want people to remember you, hundreds of years from now? How do you want people to remember you and VANLELES diamonds? Like, what is it that you want to be able to establish? And also, in terms of mentorship, is that something that you enjoy doing? Just to in closing.
Well, to answer those few questions for you, I think the other day, a friend, we were going through difficult times during COVID, post-COVID. I was like, what am I going to do? This is so difficult. And a friend of mine told me something. Vania, what you have to understand, your brand, where you stand, your brand VANLELES is not longer your brand alone. It belongs to the community for what it stands, for who you are, your story, your background. So whatever decisions you make, you have to think outside your immediate orbit, because it's bigger than you now. And my legacy is to make sure VANLELES survives as a brand, as a deeply rooted African brand, promoting African gemstones in countries and communities where the gemstones come from. And to see VANLELES next to rivaling all other big brands that have way much more resources than I do. And we are already there because our positioning, you open Forbes magazine, you see us, they talk about LVMH brands, and we right in the middle of there, you open and
Vogue as well, everywhere.
Exactly. But to make sure that one day, I hope I'll be able to own retail stores standing alongside all those big brands as a very authentic, strongly African brand, creating jewelry that appeal to the global woman. And my legacy, I hope, if I inspire more women and men from the continent or the diaspora to have their own luxury, beautiful businesses, is just going to be, in the jewelry, because I think in the jewelry, we've been very little represented in fine jewelry. There's not much representation there. And then just to have us alongside, in 100 years, you walk in Place Vendôme in Bond Street, you see this beautiful, strongly Protestant African brand. I'll be very happy. And then also opening stores or having on the continent. Let's say Ghana, let's say South Africa, and just like you go and buy your diamond engagement ring from VANLELES Diamonds. This is it's not a South African, but it's an African brand. You know what I mean? And she's the first. I hope I'm not the only one. I don't want to be the only one ever. I would love to inspire. If I can train, I will. All I ask, I'm happy to help, because I've done it all, and I've done it all pretty much alone, without any. When I say I've done it all alone, even my company, I learned everything from shipping to importing, buying, sourcing, designing, everything. I know how to do everything inside my company. This is why when I hire someone, I know exactly, how
what you're
much you're working, what you're doing. So have the dream, have the plan, action it, and then ask for help. Because I got help, but I started it already, you know. And I'm here. My story for you, without starting anything, is to inspire you. When you start something, come in, you know, with a concision set of questions and needs and wants, and then I'm happy to guide you through that. Don't come in for a chit chat.
Yeah, definitely. Vania, thank you so much. Vania Leles of VANLELES Diamonds. Thank you very much for
Thank
this
you.
conversation. Again, congratulations on what you're achieving. And also, we didn't really touch on it in the conversation, but I know that ethically sourced gemstones is such a cornerstone to what it is that you do as a business. So even from that perspective and sustainability, congratulations on that. You know,
Thank you so much.
you're definitely ticking off all of the boxes.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's just been, I've loved talking to you. It's been fantastic, honestly speaking.
Simple thing, you go to these markets. I love, like you're saying, I love the continent. I love going to Nigeria. I come to Accra quite often. And you go to the markets. Have you ever sat down and understand the amount of cash that flows on the ground on a daily basis?
Hey, I'm Lee Kasumba, and this is our journey across Africa, navigating the intricate landscapes of business, culture, and global influence from the African perspective.